The war between the United States, Israel and Iran has spread in the Gulf. While the two sides continue relentless attacks on each other, Iran's neighbors have now found themselves in the crosshairs, raising questions over whether they could be drawn into the war. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Kuwait have all reported fresh attacks. On Sunday, Kuwait said 2 border guards were killed while on duty, and fuel tanks at the country's international airport were targeted in a drone attack. The UAE said its air defenses detected 17 ballistic missiles, destroying 16 of them, while 1 fell into the sea. 3 people were also wounded in Bahrain, and a water desalination plant was damaged. Saudi Arabia's defense ministry said its air defenses intercepted 15 drones, including 1 targeting the diplomatic quarter of the capital Riyadh. All these attacks have sent ripples across the Gulf region. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says he is constantly in touch with Riyadh. The attacks are ongoing, despite Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian apologizing for strikes in the Gulf region.
Israel and US wants us and the Islamic countries to be at war. They want to create division between us and them. What is happening is that if from any country they attack our soil and carry out aggression, naturally, we are obliged to respond to them. When we respond to them, this does not mean that we have a dispute with that country. It does not mean that we want to upset the people there. If we have disagreements among ourselves, we must resolve them internally and not allow them to use these disagreements to carry out their malicious intentions. This must not be allowed.
Saudi Arabia has for a long time refrained from taking an offensive stance, and reports suggest Riyadh has reached out to Tehran as it continues to favor a diplomatic solution to the conflict. But Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan has warned that continued attacks on the kingdom and its energy sector could force Riyadh to respond in kind and even permit US forces to use bases in Saudi Arabia for military operations. If Saudi Arabia changes its stance and launches retaliatory strikes, it could also drag Pakistan into the conflict and also the wider Gulf. Saudi Arabia is one of the members of the Arab League, which shares a defense pact requiring member states to coordinate military defense measures and consider any aggression against one member as an attack on all members. Earlier this week, Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman met Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir to discuss the situation. The meeting is significant because of a strategic mutual defense pact signed between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan in September 2025. The agreement, signed by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, states that an attack on one country may be treated as an attack on both. This means that any major strike on Saudi territory could potentially trigger Pakistan's defense commitments. Pakistan has long maintained close military ties with Saudi Arabia, with Pakistan troops stationed in the kingdom for training and defense support. However, direct involvement in a wider Middle East war will be complex for Islamabad, which is currently facing economic pressures and internal security challenges. Mr. John Erath is a Senior Policy Director for the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation in Washington. He's now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Erath, it's good to see you and thank you very much for your time. What is the possibility of other Gulf countries joining the war, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Bahrain, and what could be the ramifications of that happening?
I think that they are already involved in the war by virtue of the attacks on their territory and their citizens. So while they may prefer not to be involved, while the war may be involving other countries right now, they are certainly part of it, no matter how they might prefer to avoid.
What do you think is Pakistan's role in this war? Can they remain neutral for a very long time, or do you think they will be embroiled in this war?
I think that Pakistan would certainly prefer to stay out of the fighting. I think that they would prefer not to be involved, but they have obligations under their mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia, and it's going to be up to the government in Islamabad to decide how far those obligations may extend.
Mr. Erath, what do you think, or what do you make of the rift between President Donald Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer?
I think that there is a difference in opinions between the two leaders, and it is caused largely by the failure of the White House to define clearly what its goals for the conflict are. Mm-hmm. It's not known whether the ultimate goal is regime change or restrictions on Iran's nuclear program or a reduction in terrorism or something else. Mm-hmm. It's not clear, and without a clear goal, it's impossible to demand support from allies. So until the White House clarifies and makes a concerted effort in that direction, we're not going to see anything change.
Mr. Arath, we're already seeing cracks in the war, strikes on civilian infrastructure, the initial strike on the elementary school in Iran, residential areas in Israel, hotels and airports in the Gulf countries. What is this indicating? Because there are mixed statements coming from the United States, coming from Iran, coming from Israel.
It indicates that in any kind of conflict, it's always going to be civilians who suffer and unnecessarily suffer. It's impossible in the modern world to simply have a war between military forces. That situation doesn't exist. There are always going to be civilians who are caught in the middle, and that's really the tragedy. It's, according to international law, it's everyone's obligation to do what they can to minimize civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure, but that's very hard to observe. You're seeing it now with some of the questions about targeting near populated areas. So this is a situation that if the conflict should go on longer, it's just going to get worse.
Mr. Arath, and still talking about civilian infrastructure, attacks on desalination plants is a new focal point in this war. Iran first accused the United States of attacking its desalination plant, and now Bahrain has accused Iran of doing the same on their civilian infrastructure. Why use water as a weapon?
It's something that is clearly a civilian target, and so clearly it would be contrary to international law, or customary international law as the term is. The question of why, it's one for the military leaders. Why are they hitting these things? Is there military value? Is it a plant that supports the military? This is a question that should be asked and answered.
All right, Mr. John Arath, it's good to see you. We'll have to end this conversation here. Thank you for talking to us today.
You're very welcome.